Hello. This is another presentation of New Dash, an application or an automation application that helps you automate business processes without having any coding knowledge. So what I want to do in this presentation is actually an actual demand we had from potential customer. And so I'll quickly explain sort of what we are trying to achieve, and then we'll use a system to try to achieve that. This is the first time I'll do this end to end, so there's a good chance that we'll run into problems, but I think that's probably more interesting rather than it being polished and just working. And so the use case is the following here. Uh, the business needs to collect a certain amount of documents from their customers. And so, for example, as a customer, you need to provide your passport picture, driver's license, and some additional forms and documents. And so, what happens today is customers send all this stuff via email, and it lands in the email inbox, and eventually someone needs to go through and classify that and make sure all it's there. And then if new versions of the documents come in, they need to juggle all that as well. And so the in the previous videos, I've basically showed how we could pull attachments out of emails and upload them to Google Drive. But what I want to do here is actually something different. So the idea is we have a Google Drive folder for each customer, or maybe in this case it's not even the customer, but it's a certain case that's being handled for a customer. And so the idea is the customer would upload files, and what we would keep within the same folder is an additional spreadsheet that contains the different type of documents that need to be submitted. And so the value prop here is each folder contains a spreadsheet telling the customers what they need to supply. They upload files, and the automation will effectively check those uploaded files against the spreadsheet. And if a file is considered to be basically a match, we add that as information to the spreadsheet. That way, we can even add to the automation later on that once everything is filled out, we send an email to a human agent so a human agent can get to work. But this should sort of simplify the work for the customers. Arguably, they are sending emails at the moment, so it's not really a problem for them. Though it should help for the agents who basically need to make sense of that data by keeping the system and the files nicely classified and sort of checked off while customers are providing them. And so yeah, let's get started building this out. So to build this out, we'd start with a new automation where we describe what we want. But I think it's easier to actually first talk about the structure in Google Drive. Now, that is something that you as a user will have to come up with. And it really depends on how you're structuring your business, right? But the idea is you structure it the way you want, and then you craft the automation rule to correspond to the setup that you have. And so in our case, let's start with a directory where we're gonna capture that information, and it would be basically a customer submitted files, and that's the folder that I basically want to observe for files that are being uploaded, and then I basically want to do something with those files. And now let's just be simple for now, and say it actually doesn't. The folder structure doesn't really matter. What we're just gonna say is for each file that's being uploaded, look in the same directory and see whether you can find this spreadsheet of ours that contains the information that we are collecting. And so we'll do a folder which is basically customer one, which is our first customer. And in there, we're going to have our spreadsheet. Now, how you probably would structure this is whenever you onboard a customer, you create the corresponding folder with whatever documents they need, and you copy paste a spreadsheet from somewhere based on what that is. that would be a different automation, right? To sort of set that up. But it's what you ultimately look at is a series of automations that play together in order to build out a business process. Yeah, so you then have to do less hand holding yourself or less manual work. And what I like about using Google Drive as a backend for this is it's very it's most people who already use Google Apps, they already have Google Drive included, as well as it keeps it in a system that's effectively product agnostic, right? So you could use New Dash today for this. I don't know, maybe in a year from now, that the whole system gets sort of done in a different way. If your data and your processes are using sort of a base system that's easy to integrate with, then that makes it easier for you as a customer to not get locked into a system that ultimately is going to be really hard to move out from. But yeah, coming back to the example here, let's say we are let's just call this required document, right? That's our spreadsheet that we have. And so in here we would have the, maybe we just, I'm making this up as I go, right? So let's say this is the description or document. Right, and so I'm going to use this very, yeah, not interesting form. I just googled for form and this one came up first. I'm Australian citizens, so I don't know, but the US citizens probably have heard of this form. So yeah, let's just say this one is form 1040. Let me just open it. So this one is form 1040. And what's this one? US. I'll just copy paste. Now, would I propose to use this for a tax agent? Possibly not. Um, it actually astonishes me how many businesses these days still send emails around with documents in them, when this should be known that this is not the way to collect and manage documents. So I probably rather would prefer this system rather than emails. But yeah, Aaron has their own opinion on this. So I'll just make this a bit larger. And so the idea now is, and then what we say is, so it's a description, and let's add a little bit more. So the idea would be, this is basically the information that's used to match. And then basically this one would be the link to Drive document. So that would be filled in. And then we might add another one, confirmed by human, which is obviously we don't want the automation to touch that, but the idea is once a human eventually goes through, they can confirm. And maybe they made as well something so they can mark it as it's actually not correct. And so in here we could have another one, which is the passport photo. It'll be interesting how how we'll implement that. We'll get to that in a moment. And there's picture of the passport display. And then you would have other documents here. So what we are aiming here for is really whatever is in here is not known ahead of time, right? So yes, if you have processes where this is 100% known, then you wouldn't need a system necessarily like this. You could go with something simpler. But what this allows you to do is having different folders with different required documents sheets, and the system basically reacts based on what's actually needed in that given folder. And so that makes it quite versatile. It makes it easy for you to update business processes because you just change those sheets that you copy into the folders. And the system basically will, or the automation that you've set up will work regardless of what you put in here. So yeah, now we have this document, and we have a folder, so that will be customer one. and we have the parent folder where we wanna basically observe documents being added to the folder. And so we now can go to New Dash and actually start building out the automation for this. And so the more details we give the agent, the easier it is for the agent to basically write the code. The way you have to look at that is it really replaces the software engineer. And so the more business details you give, the easier for the software engineer to write logic, because it gives more context in why something is done, which usually helps doing the how. And so what we say here is business process which lists various documents that need to be uploaded. And now I'm basically saying this is the folder I want, right? Custom submitted files. And now what's also good is to actually directly tell what an example of what that is, so the agent knows what to expect. And so we'll basically take this. Okay, and so now that we have that, let's kick this off and see how we go. So we also taking the first input and produce a name for the automation. So you see what the automation is about. This can be updated if you want to change the name, but the defaults are pretty good. And as before, the system is sort of warming up, and so this takes a bit of time to kick in. This is just an early user. Once we have more customers using the system, this will be also pretty snappy. And so what we need in this case here is actually a trigger for Google Drive document. And so that's something I've been working on the last few days. It's pretty painful to get going. But once that's working, it works pretty well. You'll see we'll get asked for some details of the Google Drive. That's not it's not fully hooked up to the agent yet. So we'll see what happens next. Interesting. So the agent in this case didn't actually execute it. So we go ahead and run it here. Okay. And so as a next step, we need to grant the automation access to to, in this case, to look at Google Drive files. Um, Again, needs permission. I'm pretty sure something's not 100% right because we're doing this slightly too often, but uh, ideally, once you've done that for all your needs, basically, you don't have to do that again. Okay, and so now we are getting to, now we get where it gets a bit more complicated. So now we need to set up the the trigger, which is really what kicks off automations. And so in this case, what we are setting up is like a Google Drive watch that will react to whenever something happens in the Google Drive. And so in our case, we want to observe a specific folder, which is this folder here. We've given this to the agent. This will improve. The agent should actually automatically pre-fill this. But in this case, we have to do this manually. It's not, I don't think it's rocket science. It tells us that it's a folder. We want subdirectories, definitely in this case. And we are actually only caring about files. So when we add a new folder for customer, we don't want to be informed. And so the create and modified is good. That's what we care about. And so now we're gonna set up that trigger. Oh, and an error occurred. That's not ideal. Yeah, there was a bug. Let's try again. So now it's saved. By making some changes earlier today, I broke something else. So the agent is actually the one that's meant to execute this. We shouldn't have to be asked to manually do that. But for reasons, that's changed. Okay, and so basically what's now happening next is um, I've basically made the choice with this tool that I want to guide users through how the tool ultimately works. Because if you look at how automation systems work, usually usually with automations, it's not the putting together the different nodes that's the hard part. Even though that's not always easy for users either. Where it actually gets finicky is at the end, where you connect things together and you need to make sure everything actually works. And so that's one thing, that's sort of where automations ultimately become complicated or just tedious to set up. And so my choice was basically let's front load this, or let's rather do it with the user while going through the automation. And that way you basically do a task in order to achieve an outcome, and you work together with the agent in order to build this system up end to end. And so in this case, what this means is we are basically being asked to actually upload something to Drive, so we get basically the event, so we can basically then run the automation on the back of it. And so let's basically do that. Let's go to customer one. And so the document that we basically gonna upload is this 1040 PDF. And so I'll basically just upload that. As a to remind, we basically have these two documents, and we are sort of expecting this link to be filled in by the automation. And so now the document is uploaded. That should inform the system that the thing is there, and so we can click on check again. And so again, if the agent triggered this would actually just have worked, but because the agent did not, we have to manually trigger it again. That's not how it's supposed to work. And so, but it's still, after triggering it, it now found that event, and so now it runs the second task of matching and updating the sheet. This should actually ask us again, for the configuration. Oh, that's interesting. It asks us for the spreadsheet ID, right? And so that is actually not what we want. And so this is a case where the agent did not understand what we ask it to do. And so instead, we should actually tell the agent, hey, it isn't working the way it's supposed to. I kind of can see I'm actually hiding what I'm typing, so I'll quickly move this over slightly. Oh, it's not. Yeah. And so yeah, we are effectively telling it now, look, do something different um, to what you implemented. The, as always with AI, the more explicit you prompt, the closer you get what's called a single shot. In one go, it basically gets everything right. It's if I sort of gave this rule out as sort of a big example on the website, I probably would add way more information to it, and so you would basically copy 1 or 2 pages of information. But given we were relatively, like, we didn't actually write that much text, as you can see, it's just this thing up here and then this here. It's the agent already does a pretty good job at building something. And so, yeah, what it thought was it's a pre-configured spreadsheet. Okay, this is probably still the wrong one. Yeah, we're gonna have to run it one more time. Okay, and so this is what I wanted. So now it actually just wants to connect to Google, so I can read those Google Drive files. We'll do that. It's the I can sort of tell we are it's asking me too often. So something's not 100% right either. But the idea basically is whenever we need more permissions, the users basically ask. This is also something that Google requires. Don't ask for the world before you need it. But as a result, you're basically getting prompted a few more times. Um, this is all part of the setup process of the automation. So these details are being remembered. Okay, so um, now it completed. I'd be very astonished if this actually worked. This was too simple. Um, yeah, updated cells here, right? And so, um, yes, and so what it basically says is found no matching title for the file. Um, I I think it actually misunderstood what title meant here. And so what it meant was the file title had that. But what I actually wanted it to do is I want to look at the content of the files and then compare the content to the information inside the spreadsheet. Just to be clear, this is not a straightforward automation. This would involve custom coding in most cases, and so quite a few different boxes in other systems as well. And so I think it's totally fine that it's getting it wrong based on the limited input that we've given it. So what the expectation is, what the system should do in this case, is actually use AI at this point. Take the document, extract the text from it, and then send this together with the spreadsheet content to the AI and say, hey, is there like, can you tell me whether any of the rows match the contents of the document, and based on that update the document. um, it's looking for a guide here. So the guide actually has to do with calling a large language model. So it's already sort of on the right track. I'm curious how it's doing actual extraction of content because we haven't given it any libraries to do that, and so this might work well or might not work at all. We'll find out. So I'll run it one more time. So I guess the fun part here is you sort of just it's trial and error that you try a few times and see where you get with that. Now it's being back to asking for spreadsheets. And so, yeah, your mileage may vary with this. The the what I should call out here is we are not actually using the latest state of the art model. So if you used Opus 4.5 by Anthropic, the the intelligence of the agent would go up dramatically. And so some of the basically loose wording that I use or unclear context, it would fill incorrectly, whereas the current system um, might or might not get it as right. What's nice is that's basically one of the levels we can pull on this system. We can effectively pay more money in order to use a better um, to use a better doc model in order to improve the quality of the coding agent. Now, once the system is coded and works, you actually don't need the coding agent anymore. So it's much easier to justify spending money on expensive models because you don't use this every day in your running costs. So this time around, it downloaded the file, got a PDF, and so it basically decided it's just going to throw the whole thing to the LLM, and that's effectively not what the system, um, at least what we've added as a sort of capability. That is not how it's supposed to work, and so I think we are reaching the limits of what the system can do right now. The good news is it's actually not hard to fix for us. We in this case, what we should do is we should give the agent capabilities to extract content from files, which would solve this problem. But we can ask it and see whether it can write the right code for that. I also realize I really need to, for demo purposes, this chat is at the wrong place because I'm sitting in front of it all the time. So what usually happens when the agent kicks off the system, it runs it, it fails, and it automatically goes back to the agent. And so so the agent basically would auto fix stuff up. Um, there you go. So um, this is this is by no means perfect. But what you see here is actually filled in the file. The only reason it did that is because it took this text and it compared it to the name of the file. That's that's all, in my opinion, not good enough. But what the agent clearly said here is actually what's the important part. It said at the moment it doesn't have any capability to parse PDFs or images. That's a capability that we can add to New Dash relatively easily. And as soon as we do that, it can basically perform these tasks cheaply, and that will immediately improve the system. Obviously, you have to go back to the agent and say, hey, I want you to use capabilities to extract text and images, and then use that. Now, the system is not working perfectly, but it's, let's say this is good enough, and let's say this worked. So the next thing you would do is you actually activate this rule. And so we also activate the trigger. That means it starts observing files. And so now it's active, the trigger should be active. And now I think we should go and actually test this out. And so what we'll do is we'll delete this row again. We'll go and we are creating another customer here. And what we'll do is, let's say this document is actually the document that we want to use. Curious how you actually copy in Drive. Yeah, that did not work. So let's go back to customer one. It's a long video. Apologies. Okay, I'll just move this around quickly. So this goes to customer two. We have to rename it to what it actually should be for it to work, because in the rule we would have said it's the required document. And so right now it's basically the same here. What you will see with this rule, because I just copied data and so on, it effectively did this. It actually ran the rule a few times. When I copied the file and when I renamed it, probably, or once of those was when I created a folder. But yeah, now the system is there. Now we should be able to, for customer 2 to actually upload a PDF. Let me first show the document doesn't have anything in it. And so now we upload the PDF. We can go back and see it's running again. This is the latest execution. You see it's actually relatively fast. Oh, there's 4 and 5. I'll have to check why it's... Oh, you know what? One of them is actually the Google Sheet that I just opened. And so this is the one that actually does what it needs to do. And I expect that this updates this momentarily, except it does not. It failed again. Oh, this is interesting. It didn't actually... I asked it to make those changes, but it doesn't look like those changes actually got fully applied. I think this is where we have to cut our losses and take it to the next video. Thanks for watching.